Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. I'm so mad at her. I'm ready to kill her. I growled angrily, taking another sip of beer. Hey Johnny, don't even say things like that, Billy said, which was kind of funny because Billy had a hotter temper than me. In high school, he was constantly getting into fights, and the slightest thing could make him lose his temper. But she's cheating on me, I whined. It looks like she's been making love to her doctor friend for a couple of months now. How could she do this to me? Billy ordered us another drink, and when we sat down at the table, he asked me to tell him what had happened. I didn't really want to go into details, but still, oddly enough, I wanted to talk about it. Something like a conversation about a surgery. So I started from the beginning. I always thought Doris and I had a very good marriage. Of course, we quarreled from time to time over various things, which couple doesn't? But then we always kissed and made up, and that's all that matters. In terms of money, we had a pretty good life together. I dropped out of college in my sophomore year. These academic things weren't for me. But I really didn't need a degree, because I am, as they say, a born salesman. In the end, I got a job at one of the two largest car dealerships in the city and soon began to earn good money. So Doris and I got engaged when she was a freshman and got married when she was a senior. The funny thing is that Doris also took up sales. After graduating from university, she went to work for one of the major pharmaceutical companies. This basically meant that she was selling prescription drugs. Anyway, we weren't rich or anything, but we were fine. There are no children yet, but it will come. At least that's what I thought. The first thing that attracted me to Doris was her figure. When I first met her, she was slim and fit. And even better, even after 6 years of marriage, she remained like that. It was partly good genes, I think, but she also became obsessed with training. She goes to the gym 3, 4, even 5 days a week. The good news is that her body was tense, not like that pumped-up bodybuilder who makes me sick, but more like that Jillian Michaels woman you see on TV all the time. I really liked it. But the bad news was that all these exercises seemed to really exhaust her. Lately, when I wanted to enjoy that hot body in bed, all she wanted was to sleep. But as I just found out, there was another reason she didn't want to do horizontal mambo with me. That reason was Morris Fisher, one of the doctors she regularly consulted. I accidentally came across an affair between my wife and a kind doctor. Despite the fact that she is the smartest in our family, Doris is the type of person who always forgets something. I can't even count the number of times we had to look for her lost cell phone or go back somewhere to pick up her abandoned purse. Therefore, it was not unusual for her to leave her laptop at home when she left for work this morning. But what was unexpected was an email that I found in my mailbox titled, "It was so hot yesterday." Of course, I opened it right away. In short, it became apparent that he and Dr. Fisher had been using email for several months to arrange meetings at the motel. Judging by the contents of the other letters I read, it was quite obvious that they did not meet to compare the relative merits of different medicines. When I searched through her mail and saw what she was telling him, it also became clear that it was much more than just a casual relationship. They were both in the midst of a full-blown romance. I didn't expect this. I moaned plaintively to Billy. What should I do, boy? Well, if it was my wife, I'd give her a fist sandwich right before I threw her to the curb, Billy said smugly. No, I'll never be able to hit Doris, I said. I'll just have to divorce her and live my life. But I would really like to take revenge on Dr. Morris Fisher for ruining my marriage. While I was sitting and drinking, an idea came to my mind. I leaned across the table and said quietly to Billy, "Hey, buddy, can you help me get some revenge? I think I know how we could make sure that it doesn't affect us." Billy's eyes twinkled. "Tell me what you've come up with," he said impatiently. My idea was simple. We'll use Doris's email to lure the good doctor back to the motel, but we'll be waiting, not her. We'll tie him up, take his clothes, and leave him there in his underwear. Then we'll call the TV news to get him filmed when the police rescue him. This will show the world his true face. But he'll know we did it, Billy protested. I've thought of everything, I assured him. We will wear ski masks and surgical gloves so as not to leave fingerprints. Everything will be perfect. Okay, smartass, but you're forgetting one thing, Billy said. If he gets a letter from your Doris, he'll know you sent it. Maybe, I agreed. But even if he did, I don't think he'd say anything. If he does, he'll have to admit that he had an affair, and I bet his wife won't like it too much. Billy looked at me shrewdly. Maybe you're right. Besides, he may suspect you, but he can't prove anything. Especially if I delete the email from Doris's computer after I send it, I said triumphantly. Come on, Billy said. I hate fucking cheaters. That damn doc owes you for using your wife. Okay, here's how we'll do it. I'll send him an email from Doris's computer tonight and set up a meeting at their regular motel right after lunch. Tomorrow morning you will go and book a room. When he shows up, we'll grab him. And then we'll cut something off? Billy asked impatiently. No, 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 I said hastily. We don't want to get caught. We'll gag him, strip him, tie him to a chair, and leave him. I'm going to make an anonymous call to the police about a disturbance in the room, and you're going to call your buddy on TV and tell him that the police are investigating something serious at the motel. It's going to be all over the news. He's going to be the laughing stock of the whole city. If he keeps his mouth shut, it will still be very awkward for him, because everyone will know that he was hiding in the hotel. And if he tells them why he went to the motel in the first place, everyone will know about his affair with Doris, and then I'll throw her out. That sounds great, Billy said eagerly. I can't wait. Just remember one thing, Billy, I added. When you rent this room, don't use your credit card. Why is that? I tried not to roll my eyes. Because you really don't want the police to find out who rented the room where the doctor was captured, I said impatiently. Yeah, Billy said. I mentally shook my head. Billy was a great guy, but he's not going to get the Nobel Prize anytime soon. That evening, when I returned home, I acted as if nothing had happened. I even hinted to Doris that I would like to have some fun in bed after dinner, but she quickly rejected the idea, as I expected. I didn't know if Fisher had tired her out, or if she was so fixated on him that she didn't want me to touch her. In any case, I will leave this cheater as soon as I get revenge on her lover. After she went to bed, I found her suitcase on wheels, the one she used to roll all her medicine samples for doctors. Of course, the laptop was inside. When I launched it, I found that the email was password protected, but I expected this. Because of her forgetfulness, Doris kept the passwords written down on a piece of paper tucked into her wallet. I pulled out a piece of paper, typed in the password, and bingo. I came in. I quickly started typing my little invitation to the love doctor, and I was pretty sure I knew how to express it so that he couldn't resist. But halfway there, I stopped abruptly. We had a big problem. Billy was going to get a motel room tomorrow, but I needed to know right now which number to tell the good doctor. Keep it up, stupid. I cursed myself. And you won't get the Nobel Prize this year either. I quickly called Billy. When he answered the phone, I asked, Can you talk? Of course I can, he replied. Can't you hear me? No, no. I almost shouted. I mean, can you speak without Phyllis hearing you? Oh, he said. She's not here. Tell me. When I explained my dilemma, Billy said, Just make an anonymous call to the doctor tomorrow and tell him the room number. Yes, it will work, I said sarcastically. Don't you think he might get suspicious if some man calls him and tells him where to meet my wife to make love for a while? Yeah, Billy said, and I stifled a groan. And then it dawned on me. I get it, I said impatiently. When you go to the motel tomorrow, rent a room for 2 days. Then I will write to the doctor tomorrow evening that the appointment is scheduled for the next day and which room to go to. Okay, but what are we going to do with the room tomorrow? We're not going to do anything, I said, trying to contain my irritation. Well, I think it's a waste of time, Billy said. Besides, I don't think my credit card can afford 2 days. No credit cards, Billy. I screamed and then put my hand over my mouth because I didn't want to wake Doris. Listen, Billy, if you don't have enough money, I'll give it to you, but only in cash, not by credit card. Don't forget, pay in cash. He agreed, but I had a bad feeling about it. Nevertheless, Billy did as I told him and called me back the next day with the room number. It's not a problem, Johnny. The desk clerk didn't even look at me, and I paid in cash, as we agreed. And here's the thing. We have a 101 number. It's at the very end, so it should be very quiet there. That sounds great, buddy. Well done. I'll send this letter tonight, and you take what we agreed. What else, Johnny? I let out a deep sigh, but managed to keep my composure. Duct tape and your camera, I reminded him. I'll bring surgical gloves and ski masks for us." "Oh, yes," he said. I hung up the phone and swore softly. If he says, "Oh, yes," one more time, I swear I'll scream. Doris went to bed early again, so I had no problem texting Dr. Fisher. In the letter, I promised him fervent love, which he had never had before. If only he would appear in room 101 at the motel tomorrow at 1 o'clock. "I'm going to knock you down," I wrote, and this phrase made me laugh all night. When the big day came, everything didn't seem so funny to me anymore. I started to wonder if I was going to do something really stupid. But when I remembered all those love letters between the two cheaters, my anger flared up again. Dr. Fisher deserved all the humiliation he was about to experience, and so did Doris, for that matter. I was a faithful husband who was treated unfairly. They deserved what was due to them. Around noon, I called Billy on his cell phone to make sure everything was ready. He was supposed to come to the dealership at 12:30 and pretend to be a customer so I could take him for a test drive. It was our legend, and I wanted to make sure everything was okay. "Where are you, Billy? Are you at home?" "No, I spent the night in a motel room," he replied nonchalantly. "What?" I shouted. "Why did you do that?" "Well, it seemed a shame to leave it empty. Besides, Phyllis and I had a fight, and I needed to get out of the house." Again, all I could do was shake my head. Billy's wife was a pretty little nurse who worked at the hospital. Doris knew her because they both worked out at the same gym. As far as I could tell, Phyllis seemed like a good woman, but she and Billy were always fighting about something. Still, I didn't like the idea of him leaving all the evidence in the motel room. I watched the criminologists and knew what they could find. "Billy," I said sternly, "I thought we agreed that we didn't want to leave any traces in the room." "Yeah," Billy said, and I bit my tongue to keep from screaming. "Listen, Billy, clean up your mess, wipe everything you touched, and then go to the dealership. Remember, you have to be here at 12:30 sharp." Despite my misgivings, Billy arrived at the showroom at 12:30 p.m. sharp. I signed up for a demo, and we rushed to the motel. When we got there, I handed Billy a pair of surgical gloves and pulled on my own. Then we entered the room. It was a mess, as I expected. At first I was afraid that Fisher might show up earlier, but when did the doctor arrive on time? Anyway, working together, we tried to put everything in order before he appeared. Billy and I closed all the blinds and curtains in the room, and then I turned off all the lights. The last thing I did was adjust the small latch so that the door would remain slightly ajar. Then we pulled on our ski masks and retreated around the corner. It was very dark, except for the light seeping out from under the door. While we waited in silence, Billy surprised me when he leaned over and whispered in my ear. "It's really creepy here." It took all my strength not to strangle him. "Hush, Billy," I hissed. "He could be outside right now." "Oh, yeah." Before I could answer, we heard footsteps in the hallway. I shushed Billy and pointed at the camera in his hand. He nodded, and I hoped that meant he remembered what he had to do. I looked around the corner. At that moment, the door opened and a man entered the room. "Hey, Doris, where are you, beautiful lady?" he called playfully. I nudged Billy to get ready. "I'm here," I said in a whisper, and when he turned in our direction, Billy turned on the camera. The flash hit the doctor right in the face, and he screamed as the bright light blinded him. I waited until he stopped rubbing his eyes, and when he dropped his hands, I hit him. I'm a pretty big guy, and I had to fight, so I knew how to handle myself. I must have added a little extra to that punch, because Doc fell like a stone on the carpet. I started dancing, swinging my aching fist. "It hurts like hell," I moaned. Fortunately, Billy was all business. He made sure that the room door was closed and locked, then returned and checked on the lover. He whistled. "You really put it in, Johnny," he said admiringly. He turned off like a light. "Hush," I hissed, "and don't call me by my name." "I'm sorry, Johnny." "Come on," I commanded. "Help me get his clothes off." We took off our ski masks and tried to undress the doctor. You will be surprised how difficult it is to undress a limp body. But after long jerks, we stripped the doctor down to blue-striped boxers. None of us wanted to touch his private parts, so we stopped. Then we sat him down on a chair and taped him down. Even though he seemed to be unconscious, I didn't want to risk him waking up and screaming, so I also taped his mouth shut. "Okay," I said, "we're done. Let's throw his clothes in the trash can in the parking lot and then go back to the dealership. Are you sure you don't want to cut something off for him? Billy asked, pulling a sinister-looking jackknife out of his pocket. Put it away, Billy, I said hastily. We've already talked about this. All we want is to humiliate him, not cripple him. Okay, Billy said, and to my relief, he put the knife away. We gathered up the rest of the doctor's clothes and headed for the door. When we left, I used the metal latch to keep the door from closing. Why did you do that? Billy asked. So that the police and reporters can easily get into the room, I told him. Yeah, Billy said. I sighed nervously, and we headed for the back door of the motel. On the way back to the dealership, I threw the doctor's clothes, gloves, and ski masks into a dumpster. When we got back, Billy climbed into his pickup truck to drive away. I leaned over to make sure he remembered what to do next. I'm going to make an anonymous 911 call and report a disturbance at the motel. As soon as you get home, call your TV buddy. Tell him that you just saw the police drive up to the motel, and it looked like something serious had happened. He nodded, and I could only hope that he understood everything correctly. The test drive I had with Billy lasted a little longer than usual, but no one said anything about it. I mentally breathed a sigh of relief. It looks like we got away with it. The rest of the day seemed to drag on forever, but finally the day ended and I jumped in the car to go to the bar to meet Billy. I was so worked up that I felt almost stoned. The thought of seeing the good doc being led out of a dirty motel in his underwear on the 10 o'clock news made my mouth water. It would be even better to see Doris's face as she watches it with me. Billy, of course, was already sitting at the table and waiting for me with a beer. Well, I asked impatiently, did you call your friend as we agreed? Yeah, he said, and took a long drink from the bottle. Did the reporters film the doctor leaving the motel? Of course. Well, what did your friend say? What did Fisher look like? Billy just shook his head. It's hard to tell in a body bag. A body bag? What kind of body bag? The body bag the doctor was in. I stared at him in horror. He was dead, Johnny, Billy said. He had to be carried out in a bag. How is that possible, Billy? When we left, he was fine, except for a bruise on his jaw. Someone must have entered the room after we left and killed him, Johnny. When my friend called me back to thank me for the tip, he said that the maid had found the doctor with his throat cut. There was blood everywhere. This will be the main report in today's news. So far, the only time in my life that I felt drugged is when I got really licked while playing football in high school. But then I felt like I was going to faint. The worst thing that could have happened. I took a long sip of beer to calm myself down and stared at Billy. Do the police know who did this? Nah, Billy replied calmly. My friend said that no one saw or heard anything. Look, Billy, this is bad, very bad. We could be in real trouble. Why? He asked. We didn't kill him. You and I know that, but the police don't know that, I said irritably. If they find out that we tied him up, they'll probably try to pin the murder on us. Oh yeah, I wanted to reach across the table and strangle him, but I knew now was not the time to lose control. Look, Billy, we have to keep this a secret. You won't tell anyone, not Phyllis, not your TV news buddy, not a thing. If you let it slip, we could end up in jail, you know? Of course, Johnny, of course. I really hope that the police will immediately find out who killed him. As soon as they make an arrest, the danger will be over. Don't worry, Johnny. I'll keep my mouth shut, he said, making that stupid hand and mouth gesture we learned in 5th grade. I thought I was going to be sick. When I went home, I could only pray that Billy would keep quiet, but I doubted that he would be able to hold out for long. I was sure that if the cops ever took him in for questioning, we were doomed. Why the hell was I trying to get back at that bastard doctor? Why didn't I just file for divorce from Doris and leave everything as it is? Doris. Damn it. I was planning to meet with her tonight about her cheating. Well, we'll have to leave it now. I just have to go home and act fat, dumb, and happy with her. How it hurts. I hoped I could pretend well enough to fool her. When I returned home, everything turned out to be even worse than I expected. As soon as I entered, Doris ran up to me and burst into tears. What's the matter, honey? What happened? Oh, Johnny, she sobbed. It's so terrible. This dear Dr. Fisher, to whom I have been referring all the time, has been murdered. It's all over the news. I can't believe this, I said, trying to sound shocked and sympathetic. What happened? His body was found in a motel room, she moaned. His throat was cut. I know I shouldn't have said it, but I couldn't help myself. Did they find him in the motel room? It looked like he was going to meet someone for a little afternoon fun. You don't know him, she snapped. Anyway, at a time like this, you need to put aside bad thoughts. I'm sorry, dear. I didn't mean to take such a terrible tragedy lightly, I said with remorse. In fact, it annoyed me that I had to speak well of him. I didn't want to kill him, but it didn't bother me too much. But what really put salt in my wounds was that I knew the real reason Doris was so upset. This went on all evening. Every time she entered the room, Doris's eyes were full of tears. When we watched the news, she hid her face in a handkerchief. It was sickening, especially when the TV reporter started talking about what a terrible loss his death was to society. It shouldn't be like this, I thought. They should be talking about what a vile traitor he was, not extolling him to the skies. It's just not fair. Doris went to bed without even having dinner, so I had to make myself a sandwich to keep from starving. But the truth is, I wasn't that hungry myself. In addition to the stress of having to pretend to be a caring husband next to Doris, I was terribly worried about what might happen next. Billy and I tried to be careful, but what if we left some evidence? What will I tell the police if they come after me? Who's going to believe that we tied up Fisher but didn't hurt him, except for that light blow to the jaw? After a sleepless night, I went to work the next day, but it was no easier there either. Dr. Fisher had bought cars from us before, and his murder was the main topic of conversation. Everyone had their own theory about who did it and why. I thought about offering some alternative theory in the hope of confusing people, but for the life of me, I couldn't think of anything. In the end, I decided to keep silent in the hope that all this would pass quickly. When I met Billy at the bar that night, it was obvious that he was eager to see me. "You'll never guess that I found out about the doctor's murder," he greeted me loudly as I approached the table. "Shut up, Billy," I hissed. "I don't think we're going to talk about this with anyone." "Of course, but you have to hear it. My friend found out something that the police haven't told anyone about yet." Despite my nervousness, I couldn't help but be curious. "Well, what's the matter?" He leaned across the table to me. Wow, that was a shock. I leaned back in my chair and tried to think about the consequences. "That's not all. The cops are pretty sure the killer is a man. They don't think a woman would be strong enough to knock him out, undress him, and put him in a chair. They think it would take a pretty big guy to do all this." This latest news made me dizzy. "Oh my God, Billy, I'm in business now. If they ever connect us to this case, I'll most likely end up in the electric chair." "But you didn't kill," Billy protested. "Yes, but how can I prove it? I had a motive, I fit the description, and I had the opportunity. All they're missing is the murder weapon." "I've been watching real crime series on TV," Billy said. "You probably threw away the murder weapon." "Billy, this isn't going to help me. I didn't kill, did I?" "Oh yeah. If I was scared last night, it was even worse today. Hell, if I looked at all the evidence, even I would think I was guilty. The only positive thing was that tomorrow was my day off, and I didn't have to listen to all this endless speculation about murder. But it didn't help me fall asleep any easier. The next day, Doris went to the gym, probably to try to banish her sadness with exercise. I decided to try to take my mind off my worries for a while by doing some work in the yard. It was a wonderful day, and the lawn definitely needed mowing. So I stripped down to my old shorts and got to work in the yard. While I was cutting the grass, a car stopped in front of our house and an attractive young woman got out. She moved towards me and I quickly turned off the engine of the lawn mower. "Is your wife at home?" "What is it?" she asked, looking me over carefully. "No, I'm sorry," I told her with a smile. "You just missed each other. I'm her husband, Johnny. I'm alone." She reached into her purse and pulled out a card. "I'm Detective Monica Ferguson. Could you ask her to call me when she gets back? I'd like to ask her a few questions about Dr. Morris Fisher." I trembled with fear. "Why do you want to talk to your wife about him?" I asked too hastily. The detective smiled and patted my hand. "Don't worry," she said. "We're just trying to talk to everyone who had contact with Dr. Fisher. His office staff told us that your wife is a representative of a pharmaceutical company and visited him regularly." "Oh, yes," I said. Damn, I thought, that sounds as stupid as Billy's words. While I was mentally berating myself, She continued to look at me appraisingly, and I wondered if she was flirting with me or evaluating my criminal potential. Finally, she asked, "Did you know Dr. Fisher?" "Of course I knew him," I said, and immediately realized what I had said. I mean, I knew about him through Doris, but I never met him. She looked at me a little more, and then she said, "Don't forget to ask your wife to call me." Then, as she was about to leave, she paused and added, "See you later." I watched her as she left. Why the hell did I say I knew Fisher? I asked myself. I wonder if that sounded suspicious? And what did she mean by, "see you later"? Needless to say, the peace and tranquility that I achieved while working in the yard have long disappeared. That evening, the local evening news had an interview with the police chief about Fisher's murder. "We have discovered important new evidence and hope to make an arrest soon," he said pompously. My blood pressure was trying to climb Mount Everest. I couldn't wait to meet Billy and find out if his buddy knew anything about it. Even before we sat down at the table, I began to bombard my friend with questions. "The chief is bluffing," Billy said flatly. "My friend says they don't have anything new. They're just hoping to get someone out of hiding." But the crime scene guys had plenty of time to comb through the motel room with a fine, toothed comb. Maybe they've discovered something. "My friend says that so many guests stayed in this room and it was cleaned so often that they didn't find anything useful," Billy said. Then a worried expression appeared on his face. "You don't look well, Johnny. You have to calm down a little bit. Don't let this thing get to you." "That's easy for you to say," I snapped. "A police detective didn't come to your house yesterday. Was it a woman named Monica?" he asked. When I nodded in surprise, he continued, "Yes, the same one was in the hospital. She even talked to Phyllis. They don't have anything. They're just grasping at straws." As I left the bar, I kept thinking about what Billy had said. How could he be so calm when I was going crazy with worry? How could he be so sure that his buddy really knew the whole story? In the end, I came to the conclusion that Billy's optimism is the exact opposite of his IQ. And since I sneaked a peek at his IQ assessment file before he was expelled from school, the thought scared the hell out of me. After another sleepless night and several handfuls of antacids, I realized that I had to do something. There's no way I'm going to hold out until the police catch the killer, especially since the one they're most likely to catch is me. My only hope of saving my neck is to try to find the real killer on my own. The only problem with this plan was that I didn't have the slightest idea how to conduct a murder investigation. Sure, it looked easy on TV, but how do I do it in real life? Think. I told myself, okay, I have to assume that whoever killed the doctor knew him. It seemed unlikely that a complete stranger would wander into a motel room and kill a doctor strapped to a chair. And what about that fool that was cut out on Fisher's chest? If it's a random act, I'm ready to eat my hat. So the question was, who besides me wanted to kill Dr. Fisher? No, wait, I didn't mean to kill the doctor. I just wanted to humiliate him. It was someone else who really wanted him dead. But who? Since I didn't know Fisher, I'll have to talk to someone who knew him to get an answer to this question. And the best source I could think of was his wife. Perhaps she could guess who might have a grudge against her late husband. So now all I had to do was find a way to get her to talk to me, a complete stranger. I admit, what I did next was really stupid, but I was getting more desperate by the minute and couldn't think of anything else. So the next weekend I went to the store and bought myself a toy detective badge painted gold. He would never stand up to scrutiny. All I could hope for was a bluff. Also, I've seen someone do something similar in a movie that was based on real events, so maybe it will work in my case as well. So I put on a suit and tie and drove to the house of the late Dr. Fisher. It was quite impressive, as one would expect from a successful doctor. I sat on the circular driveway for a minute, trying to muster up the courage to go to the doctor's wife. I knew that the chances of her talking to me were slim. The chances of finding out something important are even slimmer, even if I managed to talk to her. But I also knew for sure that I didn't want to go to jail and become Bubba's boyfriend. So in the end, I went over and rang the doorbell. The woman who opened the door reminded me of cut flowers that had been in the vase for too long. The beauty was still there, but I could see that it was fading fast. I also saw the glass of whiskey she was holding in her hand. It didn't improve her appearance either. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Fisher. I'm a detective." I handed her the badge. "Another one?" She interrupted me. "Well, I hope you're a good cop. What? I asked. Isn't that what you do? The woman I was talking to the other day was definitely a bad cop, so I hope you're a good cop. Well? I stammered. Nothing, she said. Come in, and motioned for me to come in. Would you like to have a little whiskey and soda with me? What is it? She asked, leading me to her room. No, thanks, I said. I'm on duty. Well, there's no point wasting whiskey, she replied, and began to mix herself more. Judging by his shaky gait, this was not the first dose of the day. When she returned and sat down, I opened the little notebook I had bought to look official. First of all, Mrs. Fisher, let me express my condolences on the tragic death of your husband. Yes, yes, he's dead. Let's continue, she said impatiently. I was so surprised by her behavior that I couldn't help myself. If you don't mind, Mrs. Fisher, you don't seem to mourn his passing very deeply, I ventured. Mourning? Damn, I'm celebrating, she muttered, taking another sip of whiskey. My late husband cheated on me, detective. As far as I understand, he got what he deserved. I wondered if she knew about Doris, but I decided it wouldn't be very smart to ask. Still, I was curious about her attitude. Well, if he cheated on you, why didn't you just divorce him? I couldn't afford it, she replied blithely. I signed a prenuptial agreement when we got married. When I got divorced, I left with what I had brought into this marriage. No, the truth is, someone killed the bastard, and that was the best thing that could have happened to me. I blinked in surprise. Wow, if anyone wanted to accuse themselves of murder, it was her. But if she's done with her hubby, why would she say something like that, especially to a policeman? Maybe she drank more than I thought, or maybe she was innocent and extremely naive. But I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I decided to ask her about other suspects. Mrs. Fisher, do you know anyone who might have a motive for killing your husband? I asked. Oh, of course, she replied nonchalantly. And not just one. Really? I asked in surprise. Of course, it could have been any of the husbands of the wives he slept with, she said casually. My late husband just couldn't keep his pants buttoned. He cheated on me many times over the years. I wouldn't be surprised if a jealous husband decided to take revenge. She shook her head bitterly. My Morris was a real cheater, she said. I almost gasped out loud when she said that. The fact that she said the word fool didn't seem like a coincidence to me. But even though it was damn suspicious, it still wasn't a confession. Besides, she just gave me a few other possible suspects to check out. This detective game was getting more and more difficult. Do you know who his mistresses were? I asked a little nervously, wondering if she would name Doris. I have no idea, she replied. After I caught him cheating for the first time, I didn't care. Damn it, this lead is lost. But weren't you afraid that he might fall in love with one of them and leave you? Like I said, Morris just couldn't be loyal to me or anyone else. But I always knew that he would stay with me because he liked the image of a happily married man that he created in society. I couldn't help but feel sorry for her. What a lousy marriage. What about the disease? Weren't you afraid that he would infect or something like that? She grinned. He was a doctor. Even if he got something, he knew how to cure it. Besides, as soon as I realized what was going on, I stopped sleeping with him. I haven't been with a man in a long time. She put down her glass and gave me a long, appraising look. You know, you're a pretty good-looking guy. How would you like to end the girl's long drought? With that, she quickly slid off the couch onto her lap, moved closer to me and, to my surprise, began fiddling with my zipper. No, wait, Mrs. Fisher. I mean, I'd really like to, but I'm happily married. And then I stopped. I was no longer a happily married man. In fact, I planned to stay single altogether in the near future. The idea of getting a little revenge on my wife and lover, even after his death, seemed damn attractive. And since I hadn't made love for quite a while either, I suddenly felt damn horny. I stopped resisting. Between the action of her tongue and the pressure of my throat, I began to moan and move my hips, heading for the strongest climax. But she recoiled and shook her finger at me. No, 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 she said with a dirty smile on her lips. I want my share too. She tugged on my belt buckle and when it gave way, pulled down my pants. Then she stood up and pulled her skirt up to her waist. The little minx was without panties. Looking at her legs and hips, I realized that although the bloom might have wilted a little, those long stems were still in great shape, and the fragrance coming from the petals provoked them to pluck them. "Come on, baby," she cooed. "I want this big thing inside me now." "Oh my God, I need this," she exclaimed, and then she started bouncing on top of me, pulled me in, and her fingers dug into my back. I felt the same way. I haven't had love for a long time, too long, I realized. And this woman knew what she was doing. She rotated her hips, rocked them back and forth, and then started bouncing up and down again. For a girl who wasn't the youngest, she had enough energy. I was in heaven and I knew I wouldn't last long. She seemed to really like it, because she started squirming and moaning. Okay, I thought, if she likes it, let's see what happens. I put my finger in it and turned it. Instantly, she howled like a she-wolf in heat and violently pulled my head to her chest. After a couple of minutes, Mrs. Fisher leaned back and looked at me with grateful eyes. "Oh, baby, it was so good. I didn't realize how much I missed it." I looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and admiration. "How the hell did you learn to do what you were doing to me inside?" "It was incredible." She smiled and winked at me. "Maybe I'm a little older than you, honey, but I haven't forgotten all the tricks I've learned over the years." She reached out and grabbed a couple of cocktail napkins, which she handed to me to dry off. After doing the same to herself, she got up and poured herself another drink. "Do you want it right now?" "What is it?" she asked. "No," I said. "I need to get back to, the station." She looked at me lazily as I pulled up my pants and zipped up. "It was a lot of fun," she said. "We have to do it again. Hey, what did you say your name was?" I was already getting nervous. "I didn't say that," I said, heading for the door. "Oh," she said lightly. "Well, anyway, call me." With that, I slipped out the door and hurried to my car. As I drove away, I felt satisfied with the unexpected interlude I was enjoying, but my mood quickly darkened when I thought about everything she had said to me before jumping on me. If Dr. Fisher really was such a lover of married pussies, he could well have become a victim of a jealous husband. It seemed like a promising line of investigation. There could have been a few guys with a motive. But how the hell am I going to investigate them if I don't know who the doctor's other mistresses are? If anything, the more potential suspects there are, the harder it will be for me to narrow down the list. Then I thought of Mrs. Fisher. Although I found her to be an experienced and enthusiastic lover, I couldn't help but wonder if she could also be a cold-blooded killer. If she saw an email invitation to her husband to come to the motel, she could have waited until Billy and I left and then sneaked inside and got revenge. Thus, she can inherit her husband's estate while we are being accused. I had to admit, it was pretty slick if she really is a murderer. But if she killed her husband, why would she tell a detective about her motives? It seemed like a really stupid thing to do. But what if she's more insidious than she looks? What if she deliberately revealed information about the prenuptial agreement to throw me off the scent? If anything, was she really just a horny widow, or was she using me to distract me? The more I thought about it, the more my head started to hurt. Thank God it's time to meet Billy. I needed to discuss everything with someone. Over a cold glass, I told Billy what I had learned from Mrs. Fisher. My problem is, I told him, that now I have more potential suspects, and I do not know what to do with them. How am I ever going to find the real killer? Well, Billy opined, if you knew who it was, I bet you could make a lot of money. I looked at him in confusion. What are you talking about, Billy? It's very simple, he said. I bet the real killer will pay you almost anything to keep you from turning yourself into the police. This is blackmail, Billy. We have enough problems without being accused of blackmail. Oh yeah. But instead of getting mad at Billy, I started thinking about his offer. Wait a minute, I said. Maybe this isn't such a bad idea. I saw it on TV once. All we need to do is make it clear that we know who committed this dirty deed and that we need money to keep quiet about it. And then, when someone shows up to make a deal, we'll catch the real killer. Wow, that's very clever, Johnny, Billy said. Then his smile disappeared. But how are you going to report this killer if you don't even know who he is? I think I know a way, I said smugly. How did the killer even know we were going to meet Dr. Fisher at the motel? As I understand it, he or she, I said, thinking of Mrs. Fisher, Must have seen the fake letter I sent from Doris's address. So we'll just send another one in the same way and see who takes the bait. But how will Dr. Fisher get the letter, Johnny? He's dead. I sighed. I know Dr. Fisher is dead, Billy, but his killer is alive, and he's the one we need. He'll see the new letter just like the old one, and when he shows up, we'll grab him. You're a genius, Billy praised me, and this time I had to agree with him. I decided to put my plan into action immediately. On my way home from the bar, I stopped at an ATM to get some cash. Then I went to a motel and rented a room for 2 days. The receptionist was a bored teenager who was so engrossed in watching TV that he hardly looked at me. On a hunch, I decided to ask for number 101 again. The killer will flinch when he sees this. I chuckled to myself. The next morning, I got up very early so that I could send a message from Doris's address before she woke up. I spent quite a lot of time writing it, and I was very proud of my work. I know who you are and what you did to that fool Fisher. If you don't want me to go to the police, you'd better come to the same room in the same motel where Dr. Fisher died. Be there tomorrow at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and bring $20,000 in cash with you otherwise. That should be enough, I thought. I clicked send and then deleted the sent message from Doris's computer, just like last time. The trap is set, I said to myself. Now let's see who bites. I went to work as usual, but it was hard for me to concentrate. I was wondering who would show up in the motel room tomorrow. I realized that I might not even know this man, especially if he was one of the angry husbands. By the time I finished work and went to the bar, I was dying to discuss everything with Billy and find out his reaction. But Billy wasn't there, and even though I waited for almost an hour, he never showed up. It made me really nervous. Billy was always ready to drink beer. What could have happened to him? As I drove home, my paranoia continued to grow. What if Billy was taken away by the police? What if he told them about everything we've done? What if they're waiting for me at my house to arrest me? I was so preoccupied with my fears that I got home before I even realized where I was. Fortunately, no one was waiting for me there. Not even Doris had returned home yet. Just a few minutes later, I heard Doris drive up, and by the time she entered the house, I was already her loving husband. But it didn't really matter what I looked like, because she was stressed out. You'll never guess what happened today, she said excitedly. Your friend Billy is hiding from the law. I thought my heart would stop, but Doris didn't even notice. He and Phyllis had a big fight, and he gave her a black eye. She called the police, and he drove off in an unknown direction. Oh my God, I thought. If they catch him and start asking about Dr. Fisher, we're caught. But Doris kept talking about the situation and didn't notice my panic. To hide my emotions, I pretended to be interested in what she was talking about. And anyway, why did they quarrel? I asked when I had a chance to put in a word. The girls at the gym told me that Billy thinks Phyllis is cheating on him, she said, and I mentally shook my head in dismay. Are there really no more faithful wives left? I wondered. This thought rekindled my anger at Doris, and I said angrily, well, if she cheated, then it serves her right. I thought Doris would lash out at me for that little remark, but she didn't respond. It just made me even angrier. What hypocrisy, I thought. You're the vilest liar I know, but if I had raised a finger at you, you'd have screamed like hell. But for now, I kept my thoughts to myself. I didn't say anything more to Doris at dinner, and then I went to the office to think about the latest developments. Suddenly, I had a terrifying thought. What if Billy is the killer? I remembered the folding knife he had with him when we tied up the doctor. What if Billy sneaked back and killed the doctor after we left the motel because Phyllis was cheating on him? I didn't want to believe it, but it all made terrible sense. Then an even more terrible thought occurred to me. What if Billy decides to show up at the motel tomorrow? I'm bigger than him, but I'm not sure I can beat him in battle, especially if he brings a knife. I decided it was better to take extra protection with me, so I went down to the basement and took out my gun. I haven't fired it in a long time, but it looks like everything is fine. The next morning, I went to work as usual, except that I had a gun in the car. After lunch, I told the manager that I needed to rest for the rest of the day. He didn't like it, but I'm one of his best sellers, so there wasn't much he could do. I left the dealership and arrived at the motel half an hour early. I put the gun in my jacket pocket, went into the room, and opened the door with a card. I almost locked the door behind me, But at the last minute, I remembered that I wanted the killer to be able to enter, and I bolted the door. Then I settled into my chair and prepared to wait. Sitting there, I looked around the room. It was obvious that they had laid a new carpet. There must have been too much blood on the old one, I thought with a shudder. Even the chair I was sitting on looked new, and I decided that I had to change it too. Otherwise, everything looked the same as last time. It didn't make me feel any better. I didn't want to think about it anymore, so I started thinking through a list of suspects. The first was Mrs. Fisher. She had a huge motive, but it was hard for me to believe that it was her. After all, she had suffered so much from her husband for so long. It's hard to understand why she suddenly decided to do something so drastic. And yet, she may have reached her limit. And don't forget, I told myself, that she's the one who most likely has access to Dr. Fisher's email. Then there were the husbands of other women who were Dr. Fisher's mistresses. I didn't know who they were or how many there might be, but one of them could be a violent type. Perhaps he was stalking the doctor, waiting for the right moment. How he could have accessed the doctor's email, I did not know. But if he did, he could understand that we gave him a great opportunity to take revenge. Then I thought about Billy. I hoped with all my heart that it wasn't him, but I had to admit that he was a good suspect. I knew he had a short temper, and to be honest, there was something mean about him too. I never would have thought Billy would be able to fool me, but maybe he was smarter than I thought. It seemed unlikely, but I couldn't rule it out. At that moment, I heard a sound in the hallway and grabbed the gun. The door creaked open, and dim light from the hallway filtered into the room. Then, to my amazement, I heard a voice calling, "Johnny? Johnny? Are you here?" "Doris," I exclaimed in surprise. "What are you doing here?" I reached out, turned on the light, and saw my loving wife enter the room, shaking her head in disgust. "I'm here to stop you from doing something really stupid, Johnny. But how did you know I'd be here?" I asked in confusion. She crossed her arms over her chest and started lecturing me in that schoolteacher tone that I hate. "When I woke up yesterday morning, it was obvious that you were messing with my laptop. I checked my email and didn't find anything at first, but when I checked my deleted items, I saw your stupid email. Damn it, I should have thought about it." "There are a lot of things you should have thought about," she said angrily. "Maybe if you hadn't dropped out of college." "Don't try to hurt me again," I snapped angrily. "Besides, I have the right to be upset, not you. You cheated on me with your damn doctor friend. I caught you and now I'm going to divorce your ass." She made a gesture with her hand, as if she was waving away a fly. "It doesn't matter now. What matters is what you're doing here. What exactly were you hoping to do with this ridiculous email you sent from my account?" I was offended by her reaction to the accusation of treason, but I felt I had to defend myself. So I started explaining how Billy and I lured Dr. Fisher here to embarrass him, and then found out that he had been murdered. "We were afraid the police would think we did it," I told her, so I started looking for the real killer. I told her how I pretended to be a detective in order to interrogate Mrs. Fisher, and how I came up with the idea of luring the real killer here by pretending to be a blackmailer. Doris continued to sigh as she listened. Finally, she raised her hand to stop me. "Johnny, do you know Alexander Pope?" "No," I said, shaking my head. "I don't think I've ever met him." She rolled her eyes. "Mr. Pope once said, 'A little knowledge is a dangerous thing. Drink deeply or do not taste the source.' What is this Persian Spring?" "What are you talking about, Doris?" "It's okay, Johnny. You won't understand," she said, shaking her head in disgust. She took a deep breath and put her hands on her hips, and I knew it was going to start now. "You've never been the brightest light bulb, but this plan must be the dimmiest, dumbest thing I've ever heard. First of all, Fisher is dead. Why would anyone check a dead man's mailbox? Why would they even have access to it?" "Well, they could," I said defensively. "Anyway, I bet Mrs. Fisher had access to it." "So lush?" Doris chuckled. "It's not easy for her to find her way to a bottle of whiskey, let alone to get into her husband's email." "Well, it doesn't matter anyway," I said hotly, "because I think the real killer got the message after all." "And who on earth is that?" she asked sarcastically. "As much as I hate to admit it, I think Billy was the real killer. I think he found out that Dr. Fisher was patting Phyllis on the ass. After he and I left Dr. Fisher here in the room, I think he came back and cut Fisher's throat. So I bet Billy's about to walk through that door, and that's why you need to get the hell out of here right now." Doris reached into her purse, took out a pair of surgical gloves, and began to pull them on. I knew she always carried them with her because of her work at the pharmaceutical company, but I couldn't figure out why she needed them now. Then she looked at me. "I'm sure Billy won't be coming through that door anytime soon, because the police arrested him today. This idiot went to the very bar where you hang out all the time, and the police were waiting for him there." Oh, wow. I was shocked. Then I perked up. "But maybe that means he'll confess to the police and let me off the hook," I added hopefully. Doris looked at me calmly. "Is this the gun you keep in the basement?" "What is it?" she asked. Yes," I said, taken aback. "Can I see it?" "What is it?" she asked, holding out her hand. "Of course," I said, handing it to her. She examined it carefully, making sure it was loaded and cocked. Then she looked at me. "Despite your theory, I don't think you need to worry about what Billy will tell the police." "And why not?" I asked. "Because Billy didn't kill Morris Fisher." "How do you know that?" "It's simple, because I killed him." "You? Why would you want to kill him?" "You were in love with him." I almost screamed. "Exactly," she said bitterly. "I really loved him, and he said he loved me too. He promised to take me away from you and your stupid friends. He was going to marry me and show me all the best things in life. But then I found out that he was sleeping with Phyllis and that he had no intention of marrying me." She began to pace back and forth, brandishing the gun to emphasize her words. "I didn't know what to do until I heard you on the phone with Billy about renting a motel room. When I found your first letter, it was pretty easy for me to figure out your ridiculous plan to humiliate Morris. At first I wanted to warn him, but then I realized that you gave me the opportunity to get rid of both of you. So I waited until you and Billy had left, and then I slipped into the room. Morris was so happy to see me that he almost cried. But when I told him I found out about Phyllis, I saw the fear in his eyes. When I pulled out one of his own scalpels, he started begging. And then he tried to scream when I carved the word fool on his chest. But it's impossible to scream loudly through the duct tape. When I finished marking him so that the whole world could see who he was, I yanked his head back and cut his jugular vein and carotid artery with one blow. Even with all the gory details, her story still didn't make sense to me. "I can't believe you're capable of this," I protested. "Besides, you were crying and crying the night they reported his death on TV. Haven't you realized by now that women can cry on demand when they need it?" she asked with a smirk. Then her eyes darkened. "Haven't you ever read that there's no rage in hell like an abandoned woman?" "Oh, wait, you certainly haven't read it, since the only thing you read is the sports page." She stopped abruptly and pointed a gun at me. "But for some reason those idiots from the police didn't put you in jail for killing Fisher. And for all your clumsiness, you've come too close to the truth for me to let you live." "I like symmetry," she added with a grin. "It's almost poetic." I had never seen Doris like this, and it was a pretty scary sight. Who would have thought that she could turn into a cold-blooded killer? And why? Oh, why did I give her my gun? What an idiotic move. I should have tried to talk her out of it. "Wait a minute, Doris," I cried desperately. "You can't do this. One of those who received the letter I sent can walk through this door at any minute." She laughed in my face. "Here is a perfect example of why I should do this. You're dead stupid. Rest assured, Johnny, no one has seen your ridiculous letter, and no one is coming to save your stupid ass." "That's where you're wrong," came a voice from the door. "Drop the gun, or you're dead." Doris turned around in surprise and saw Detective Monica Ferguson, who came in with a gun at the ready. A uniformed policeman was standing right behind her, also with a gun. Doris hesitated, then dropped the gun with a curse, and all her strength seemed to leave her. She fell to her knees and began to sob, this time, it seemed to me, for real. Detective Ferguson looked over her shoulder at the officer and said, "Take the gun and put the handcuffs on." The cop came over and kicked the gun away, then quickly tied Doris's hands behind her back while the detective covered him. It was only after he finished that Monica relaxed and took a deep breath. As for me, I was ready to collapse with relief. "Thank God you're here," I muttered. "Another minute or two and I'd be dead." Then I looked at her in sudden confusion. "Wait a minute. Why are you even here?" Monica smiled at me. "We've had access to the late Doctor's mail since he was killed. This morning, I accidentally looked into his mailbox and noticed that he had received a new letter. I didn't know what to think when I read the message, but I definitely wanted to be here to see what would happen. I turned to Doris. Well, I guess my little plan wasn't that stupid, I teased her. She glared at me, but didn't say anything. The policeman lifted Doris to her feet and led her to the police car. Monica and I followed her, and as we walked, what she said reached me. If you had access to Dr. Fisher's email, how did you not find out about his affair with Doris? Monica shook her head. We didn't find out anything because Dr. Fisher was very secretive. Apparently, he had a habit of erasing everything that got into the mailbox as soon as he read it. Maybe he was afraid his wife would find out. As if she cares, I thought, remembering our little meeting. But I kept it to myself. There was no point in stirring up trouble, I decided. While the policeman secured Doris in the back seat, I began to think about the future. So what's going to happen to me now? I asked Monica. She patted my hand reassuringly and smiled wryly. Well, that's the district attorney's case, of course, but I bet he won't even bring any charges against you. Dr. Fisher is dead, and now we know who really killed him. Under such circumstances, I doubt that we will be able to get an angry husband convicted on assault charges. Well, whatever happened, I said, if it wasn't for you, I'd be dead by now. If there's anything I can do to repay you, just let me know. She gave me a long, slow look from head to toe, and then gave me a big smile. When all this is over, maybe I'll have to stop by the car dealership where you work and see you. I was looking for something new, something that would bring a little excitement into my life. Maybe you can help me with this. Then she winked at me, and you don't have to be a Nobel Prize winner to understand what that means.